Okay, so let's talk about SQL Server. So let me just log on here. Again, I'm logged on as SSM admin. And SQL probably is one of the most critical parts in the configuration manager. So you can have the SQL installed locally, or you can have a remote installation of SQL. In our case here, we are doing everything local, so it's going to be on the same box. It depends on the size of the environment. We may prefer to split the SQL in different boxes. So you're going to have maybe a cluster of SQL if you want a high availability or not. So for Configuration Manager, the SQL licensing, so when you buy Configuration Manager, you get the SQL standard license that can be used for Configuration Manager database and any related database. What I mean by that is like WSUS and the SQL Reporting Services database. So there are a couple of things. When you install Configuration Manager, so you must use a supported version. So we are talking here 2017, 2016 SP1, so we have standard and enterprise. Again, like I said, if you use standard is part of the license, you don't pay extra for it. And if you use enterprise, then you need to pay extra for it. And the standard enterprise, we scroll down here, is 2008, R2 SP3, so you can have for any site. And for secondary sites, you can use then the SQL Express if you want, 2017, 16, and so on, 2012 SP3. Only for secondary site. Now for a full installation, so for a primary or secondary or a CAS, you will need a standard enterprise, or depends on the version, like 2008 R2, you can have a data center. Also, when you install, you need to have a database collection as SQL Latin 1 General. So this is not the default one in most installations, so you must have them this change during the installation. As far as I know, you cannot change this after you have installed, so you need to reinstall the SQL Server. And it's only 64 bits. So there are some database compatibility level. So you may want to start with the 110. And here on the compatibility level, it tells you how to change and so on. And it depends on the configuration manager level or the version installed. So normally you leave the default. If you start feeling that there is a problem, so it's too slow, then you will change the compatibility level on the database. And we must have them Windows authentication, and the only thing we need is the database engine. If you are going to install SQL Server reporting services for reporting, then we also need to have the reporting services. Configuration Manager uses SQL Server for replica between sites and also internally. So we need to also have the SQL Broker using. In terms of memory, down here there is a rule. If you have the database installed locally or server, but the minimum would be 8 GB of RAM. And instance, you can have name an instance or default instance. However, the database port, so the connection, the SQL port has to be static. You can change from 1433, that's the default one, to anything else, but has to be static. Okay, and you have the CRL, needs to be then enabled if you disable. So what I'm going to do now is going to start the installation. So I have already here on the source, I have the SQL 2016, and I will execute this as administrator. So when we talk about SQL, normally what happens when you put the SQL logs in one folder, one drive, you put the SQL database in another drive, you change the temp DB sizes, and so on. So here on my environment, I have only one drive, so everything is going to be on the C drive. For production, you would then start splitting. So TempDB in one drive, for maybe database is one drive, logs in another drive, RAID 0, RAID 5, stuff like that. So this is not part of here, but as soon as you start putting this in production, you're going to see that there are a lot of changes you need to do. So let's then minimize this, and here on the SQL Installation Center, let's click Installation and then New SQL Standard. While it's opening, I will then create the firewall rules we will require it. So let's open here the firewall, search for Windows Advanced Firewall, and I will create two inbound rules. I'm going to create a new rule for the SQL port and another rule for SQL broker port. So one is going to be 1433. Again, I'm using the default TCP port for SQL, and I will allow the connection SQL 1433 TCP. And the other one is going to be also a inbound rule, is the 4022. That this is basically the SQL broker port that we're going to be used as part of Configuration Manager. So SQL 4022 SQL broker. Okay, then we have those two firewall rules. Well, it's still opening here. So I have here now product key. Next, license terms I accept. Then just let the global rules to run. So check validations and so on. Hopefully everything is going to pass without any problem. And pass. We will not check Windows Update, so because we are going to keep this as a default. Maybe in one environment you want to check. So next, here is a product update. So I don't mind because I don't have internet access on this environment at the moment. So I will click next, and now the installation files are being installed. So it has been completed. There are a couple of warnings. Windows Firewall is just for you to remember to open the firewall port. So here it's the link, more information, and it's application security because we don't have internet, so it could not validate some information. So that's okay, just click next. And here in features, what exactly we are going to install? This will be the Configuration Manager database, as well as our reporting services. So I select here Report Services Native. And where we are going to install. So normally what I do is put on the SQL Server in this situation, because we have only one drive. Otherwise, we start looking at binaries, for example, on the D drive, database on the E, and so on. And here on the shared features, I'm going to do on the SQL Server x86, and I will click next. Nice, doing some validations. And what is the instance name? So I'm going to use the default instance. Basically, the default instance also tells me we are going to install the configuration the SQL Server on port 1433. Next. Here on the server configuration, I'm going to use everything as a system instead of, but for more security, now you could use a user account, so a service account. It's not the case here on our training. and I will use everything as a system. As you can see here, the server agent is on manual. I will leave this, and later on when we talk about some of the tools to use to speed up the SQL, then we will look at changing the agent to automatically. So in this case, just change the accounts. And in terms of collection, so here what I said before, the SQL Latin collection, let me go back here. If I can find where it was, here. So the SQL Latin one is not actually the default one, so we need them to customize, and they will lose the SQL Latin collection. So the one that we're going to use is the SQL Latin General CP1 CIAS. So if I go back here, CP1 CIAS. So it's the one that we want. Click OK and click Next. Now our database. So who is going to be the SQL owners? So I'm going to add my current user, and of course I have a group called SCM admins. I will also give them full access to the SQL because it's installed on the same SQL server. If you install in a remote SQL, who needs full access is the configuration manager server, the account, the computer, as well as the person who is installing the configuration manager. So, and make sure you have here Windows authentication mode. Data directories, I will not change anything, but if you have already production, then you would change some of the system and user database, user logs for different folders. On the TempDB, you also can change some of the informations. Again, this is a lab, so I'm using the default settings. If you are going for production, then you need to change those numbers for numbers depends on your configuration manager environment, your SQL environment. And then click Next. On the reporting service, let's leave the install and configure and click Next. And right now, we have the summary, what exactly is going to happen. So lots of information. And here we have then the file, the INI file, with all the information if you want to install later on or do a script installation, we can use down this file. In this case, I will click here, install. It will take about 10-15 minutes for the installation to complete it. And as soon as the installation is completed, we come back and finish the SQL installation. The installation has been completed. So let's click close now. And let's close here, have the firewall open and the SQL installation center open. So the next step I'm going to do is, because this version of SQL doesn't actually come with the SQL Management Studio, so let's install it. It's not a requirement, it's just nice to have, and because we are in a lab, I'm going to install on the same server. So I'm going to install the SQL Management Studio. So I browse to the SQL Management Studio folder and run as admin. And I accept the UAC. And here on the SQL Management Studio, I'm going to click to install. So it will take a few minutes and I will be right back with you. So the installation completed, so we need now to restart the computer. So I restarting. And it has been done, so let's enter with the password and we will have the SQL Management Studio installed. Now it's time to validate if the installation has been successfully. So I open here the SQL Server Management Studio. As this is first time, it will take a bit longer. So now I'm going to connect to the database engine for the server and Windows Authentication. So validations we need to do is just check if the version, so I'm going to run here a new query and select at version and then execute. It will tell here which version we are running. So we have now SQL Server 2016 SP1, and the other option would be using the server properties, and then we look at three properties. One is the product version. Let me just copy and paste, of course, to be easy. The second one would be the product level, and the last one edition, and then execute. So we have the version SP1, and then we have here the edition that's standard 64-bit. Now we actually validate the installation of the SQL. So let's check if the reporting services actually is installed and configured. So we're going to open here the reporting services configuration and connect to the server. Let me just close and open the right one. So you go here on the SQL Server, because here it doesn't tell you where, and so SQL Server 2016 and the Reporting Service Configuration Manager. So without the CTP2 stuff next to it. And now connect. You see here the server and the instance. So we have it started, and in the web service URL we have it here populated. If not, then we would need to create. So I'm going to then browse to this folder. And for the database, we have already the database created. So if I go here to the database, we have reporting server and report server TempDB. And the web portal, same. So if I open here, it will open the reporting services website. So because we did already the configuration through the installation, we don't need to actually create those things. So on the report, so this is quite easy. So one of the steps we need to do is then change the database, reporting server database, from the recovery mode from full to simple. Basically, it's lots of backups. So we are going to change the recovery module from full to simple. So, and click OK. On the database, remember, just open this as example. Remember that we said the compatibility level. So we have here now, you could change the compatibility level on the database when required. So there are a couple of KBs from Microsoft that tells which one is recommended for configuration manager. You don't need normally change because configuration manager will be quite good to maintain the performance, but sometimes depends on the size of the environment we need to change. So we change here now the recovery module from full to simple. And the last one that we need to do is memory. So remember that configuration manager needs to have at least 8 gig, or it will complain if the memory is below 8 gig. So if you right click the server and go to properties, we have here the memory. By default, you have all the memory SQL wants to use, it will use. On our server here, I have only 8 gig of RAM for the server. So we have 8 gig. So what I'm going to do is going to give you the server 4 gig for the SQL. So this is way below the recommended setting, but this is a good setting for a lab environment. So we're going to have like 3, 4 machines, maybe 5. In production environment, you're going to give at least 8 gig. So if you have, let's say, 25,000, you're going to start adding 12, 16, 24, 32, depends on how many machines you're going to be managing. So in your lab, 4 gig, but remember the minimum is 8, and click OK. And the last thing, I will close here, I don't need to save this, click no, is actually what port the configuration manager is using, or the SQL is using. So if you're going to open here on the SQL 2016, the SQL Server 2016 configuration manager, and we go here to native, on the protocols and TCP IP, and under IP address we have here TCP port 1433. So note that's not on the dynamic port, we need to have on the TCP port. So it's 1433, that's the default port. So that's it for SQL. So there is a lot of things you need to consider. So SQL is one of the critical, well, is the most critical requirement for configuration manager. So without SQL, nothing work. If there is any performance issue, could be on the SQL side. So planning the SQL is a really big step on any configuration manager implementation.